Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. How do you respond when an HOA fences off your land, locks the gate, and mails you a letter telling you to stay off an active construction site? That's literally yours, because the next step I took triggered phone calls, lawyers, and a very awkward visit from police. There's a special kind of audacity required to treat someone else's land like your personal construction yard, then have the nerve to tell that person they're the one causing the problem. I want to say up front that I am not a dramatic person. I don't enjoy conflict. I don't go looking for fights. And I have spent most of my adult life going out of my way to keep things boring. But some people interpret patience as permission. And when that happens, I can be very thorough about correcting the misunderstanding. I own a half-acre wooded lot that I inherited from my grandfather 12 years ago. It sits on the outer edge of a neighborhood that has gotten considerably fancier since he passed. By the standards of that neighborhood, it looks pretty rough. No manicured lawn, no ornamental shrubs, no flower beds arranged in tasteful patterns. Just trees, brush, a gravel access track off the road, and 4 corner markers from the last time I paid a surveyor to confirm the boundaries. I keep it because my grandfather asked me to. That's really the whole reason. He left it to me in his will with a handwritten note saying he trusted me to keep it from being paved over. I used to walk those woods with him when I was a kid. He would point out which trees were the oldest, show me where a hawk had nested 2 years in a row, and explain which plants came back every spring without anyone planting them. That lot is worth more to me than whatever a developer would pay for it, and that's not going to change. My routine is simple. I drive out once a month, spend a few hours cutting back brush, pick up any trash that is blown in from the road, walk the tree line, and go home. Maybe 3 hours total. I've never had a code citation. I pay my property taxes on time every year, and the lot has no connection whatsoever to the homeowners association that organized in the neighborhood next door about 4 years back. That HOA came in with real energy. The neighborhood was already nice before they got going, but once the board was established, standards started climbing fast. Specific approved paint colors, mandatory lawn care schedules, rules about holiday decorations, rules about the kinds of vehicles allowed in driveways. I heard about most of this secondhand from a woman who lives a couple of streets over and has a complicated history with the board. None of it touched me at all because my lot is a completely separate parcel with its own deed, its own tax record, and its own lot number on the county map. I never signed their declarations. I never paid dues. I never attended a meeting. I don't owe them a single thing, and I made that clear when I needed to. The board president, though, had apparently decided my lot was his business anyway. I'd crossed paths with him a handful of times over the 2 years before any of this happened. He drove a very clean white SUV, the kind that looks like it has never been parked in a public lot. The first time he actually stopped to talk to me, I was out on the lot with a gas-powered trimmer. He rolled down his window from the access road and asked if I'd given any thought to doing something with the property. I turned off the trimmer and told him I was doing something with it right now. He didn't love that answer. He said the lot looked inconsistent with community standards. I explained as plainly as I could that my lot was not subject to his community's standards because it was not part of his community. He gave me a look that I can only describe as a man deciding to go around an obstacle rather than move it, then drove off without responding. I should have taken that look more seriously. At the time, I filed it away as someone who didn't like being told no. In my experience, that is just a certain type of person and usually not worth much further thought. But that type of person, when they're also in a position of minor institutional authority, can become a genuine project. The first Saturday of last October, I drove out to the lot for my monthly visit. It was a cool morning, thermos of coffee on the seat, and I was genuinely looking forward to a few quiet hours. I turned off the main road onto my gravel access track and stopped my truck because, for a real moment, I thought I had somehow turned down the wrong road. There was a 40-yard roll-off dumpster sitting in the middle of my lot, the kind so large it requires a specialized vehicle just to deliver it, the kind you see at full demolition sites. Beside it, 3 wooden pallets were stacked high with landscaping pavers that had to weigh several tons total. A backhoe sat nearby with its arm resting on the ground like it was napping between shifts. And over near the tree line, there was a bright blue portable toilet positioned with its door facing my access track as if someone had taken care to make sure I couldn't miss it when I pulled in. The ground was destroyed, Deep tire ruts cut through the soft earth in every direction, the kind of damage you get when heavy equipment has been driven back and forth across damp ground multiple times over several days. There was a dark stain on the dirt near the backhoe that looked like a hydraulic fluid leak. Construction debris was scattered around the base of the dumpster. A few orange plastic fence feet were sitting at the edge of the tree line, suggesting more was coming. I sat in the truck for a minute. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even particularly upset yet in any productive sense. I was just trying to understand what I was actually looking at before I reacted to it. Then I got out and started taking photos and video. I walked the full perimeter of the lot and documented everything from every angle. The dumpster, the backhoe, the pavers, the porta potty, the tire ruts, which in some places were 6 inches deep, the fuel stain. I also filmed the original survey stakes, those little orange pin flags on metal rods still standing at each corner exactly where they had been placed 6 years earlier. From the far end of my lot, I could see what they were building. Along the property line between my land and the HOA neighborhood, there was a freshly poured concrete foundation going in for what looked like a gazebo, with wooden stakes marking the future path of a walking trail. The actual construction seemed to be on their side of the line or right on it, but every piece of equipment, every material pallet, every supply was staged on my side. My land was functioning as a free construction yard, apparently authorized by someone who did not own it. I spent about 45 minutes documenting everything before I went and found the foreman. He came out from a truck parked just off the access track that I hadn't noticed at first. Big guy, relaxed manner, clearly not expecting any trouble. When I introduced myself as the owner of the lot and asked why his equipment was on my property, his expression shifted. He explained that the HOA president had contacted his company directly, presented himself as the person responsible for the adjacent community, and provided written authorization to use the lot as a staging area, representing it as property owned by the HOA. He pulled out his phone and showed me the actual email thread. There was the president's name from an official HOA email address, telling the contractor that the empty lot adjacent to the project site was association property and available for staging use at no cost. The foreman wasn't being difficult or defensive. He had been lied to and had zero idea. When I told him I had the deed and the lot had nothing to do with the HOA, the easy confidence left his face. He asked if I had documentation. I showed him a photo of the deed that I happened to have on my phone, which I keep there for exactly this kind of situation. He looked at it, looked at the survey stakes in the ground, and said he was going to make some calls. I told him I appreciated him being straight with me and that I wasn't looking to make his morning harder than it needed to be since he wasn't the one who had lied. He nodded and I walked back to my truck and called the HOA president. He picked up after 3 rings with a tone that already had the answer built into it, like he had assessed the situation before answering and decided I was the problem. I told him what I was looking at. I told him his construction crew had placed a dumpster, a backhoe, several tons of pavers, and a portable toilet on my private property without my permission. I told him they had torn up the ground with heavy machinery and that I needed everything moved. He did not miss a beat. He said they'd be done in about 6 weeks, that my lot was just sitting there empty anyway, that the project was going to raise property values across the whole surrounding area, and that I should honestly be grateful for the benefit I was going to receive whether I participated or not. He talked for a couple of minutes in the particular way some people do, where everything they say sounds like they are explaining something very simple to someone who is having trouble following. Then, at the end of all that, he told me that since his contractors had set up a secured active construction site on the property, I was technically the one trespassing by being there, and I should leave before I created a liability issue for myself. Then he hung up. I stood in the quiet of my lot, looking at a 40-yard dumpster and a backhoe on land my grandfather had left me, and I felt something settle into place in my mind. Not rage. It was more like a door closing on one set of options and another set becoming very clear. The option where this got resolved with a calm phone call and a mutual acknowledgement was gone. What was left was the other path. I had been on that path before in different situations, and I knew exactly how to walk it. I drove home and called a real estate attorney. I met with her 2 days later. She was sharp and economical with her time, and she didn't dwell on anything that wasn't directly relevant. She confirmed that what the HOA had done was trespass on private property, and that the president's written claim to the contractor that he owned or controlled my land was a fraudulent misrepresentation that created legal exposure both for him personally and for the HOA as an organization. She walked me through the self-help remedies available under state law for unauthorized commercial storage on private land. Those included the right to charge a reasonable daily storage rate from the date the equipment arrived, provide proper written notice of that fee, and, if it went unpaid, have the equipment towed and impounded at the owner's expense once the notice period expired. She said documentation was going to be everything. I told her I already had hundreds of time-stamped photos and a surveyor scheduled for later that week. She told me I was already ahead of most people who sat in that chair, and to call her when I was ready to send the formal notice letters. A few days after my initial visit, a letter arrived from the HOA. It was signed by the president on behalf of the board, and it was a genuinely remarkable document. It accused me of harassing their contractors, interfering with an approved community improvement project, and creating a hostile environment on what it called, word for word, board-supervised property. It demanded I cease all contact with the construction crew and stay off what it referred to as an active construction site. There was no acknowledgement anywhere in the letter that the staging area was on my land. No acknowledgement of the ownership question I had raised. It was written entirely from a reality where the HOA was right, I was being unreasonable, and the solution was for me to be quiet and go away. I photographed it and added it to the folder I was building. Then I drove back out to the lot and found that they had installed a temporary chain-link security fence. Those modular construction fence panels with the weighted orange plastic feet. They had erected it around the full perimeter of their staging area, and there was a padlocked gate on the access side, their padlock. The fence ran in a large rectangle, and most of that rectangle sat squarely on my property. They had fenced off my land and locked me out of it. I walked the fence line and photographed every panel. I paced out the enclosed area to get rough dimensions. I stood there for a moment looking at the padlock and at the survey stakes visible just past the fence line, and I understood that we had crossed a line and Apology wasn't going to walk back. Up until this point, some part of me had still been leaving room for the possibility that it was a genuine mistake that would correct itself once the right person looked at a map. The fence removed that possibility entirely. You don't accidentally install a security perimeter around land you didn't mean to use. This was intentional, and the letter demanding I stay off my own property confirmed it. I called the surveying company and scheduled the earliest available appointment. The surveyor came out 2 days later and spent the better part of the morning with her equipment and records. When she was done, she had reestablished every corner of the lot and marked the full boundary with bright neon green stakes and survey flags, the kind you absolutely cannot miss. The line was exactly where my old survey said it was and exactly where I knew it to be. The dumpster was on my land, the backhoe was on my land, the pavers were on my land, the portable toilet was on my land, a substantial portion of the fence panels themselves were on my land. She prepared a written report with GPS coordinates and a simple scaled diagram that anyone could read and understand in about 30 seconds. I paid her on the spot. While she was packing up, I drove to a hardware store and bought a heavy-duty chain and a quality padlock, the kind of lock you'd use to secure a motorcycle. I went back to the fence, ran the chain through the gate alongside their existing hardware, and locked mine right next to theirs. Now there were 2 locks on the gate. Their equipment was still inside. My lock just meant the gate couldn't be opened without me present. I hung 4 laminated signs on the fence panels, spaced so at least one was clearly visible from every direction of approach. They stated that the lot was private property, that any equipment or materials stored on it without the written authorization of the owner were subject to commercial storage fees of $500 per day, and that parties wishing to discuss the matter should contact the property owner directly. I had arrived at the daily rate by calling a commercial real estate broker I know casually and asking without using any names what a temporary construction staging lot of that size would rent for in that area. The number she gave me was actually a little higher than what I put on the signs. That night I drafted 2 certified letters. One was addressed to the HOA Board of Directors collectively and sent to the management company's address, deliberately bypassing the president to make sure the full board received it. The other was sent to the construction company, which I found through the business name on the side of the dumpster. Both letters contained the same information. My lot had been used as an unauthorized commercial staging area beginning on a specific documented date. The rate was $500 per day. The current accumulated total was itemized. If payment was not received and the lot was not cleared and fully restored within 14 days, I would have all equipment towed and impounded at their expense and file a civil claim for the full balance, plus damages for property destruction, supported by the survey, the deed, and the photographic record. Copies of the deed and the survey report were enclosed. I mailed both letters that evening. Certified return receipt. The following Monday, I was at the lot by 7:30, which is not normally a time I'm anywhere voluntarily, but I was not going to miss this. The construction crew arrived just after 8. 4 workers plus the foreman. They pulled up to the gate and the foreman stepped out. He walked up to the fence, saw both locks, read one of the signs, and stood there looking at the neon green survey stakes in the ground for a few seconds before getting on his phone. I walked over and reintroduced myself. I showed him a copy of my deed and pointed out the survey stakes. The nearest one was about 6 feet from the backhoe's rear wheel. He looked at the stakes, looked at the backhoe, looked at me, and said something under his breath that I will leave out. He was not angry at me, he was angry at the person who had put him in this position. Over the next hour, he made call after call. I could hear enough from where I was standing to understand that his contract with the HOA contained delay penalty clauses, and that every day his crew couldn't access their equipment was a chargeable event against the client who had caused the delay. The president had given him written authorization for a staging area on land he did not own or control, and now the crew was standing in a parking lot unable to work while costs accumulated. By noon, I had a call from the construction company's legal department. A woman, professional and direct, made it clear they had received my certified letter and understood the situation. She acknowledged that their client had provided false information about the ownership of the staging site and said they wanted to understand what resolution looked like. I told her the terms were in the letter and that the HOA was the right party to have that conversation with. About 2 hours later, the HOA president called me. Same number, very different energy. The breezy authority was completely gone. He wanted to talk. He kept using the word reasonable in every other sentence, like if he said it enough times, it would retroactively make his actions reasonable. I told him the terms were in the certified letter his board had received and that any substantive discussion should happen through the attorneys. He didn't like that answer. Sometime that afternoon, the police arrived. He had apparently called them and reported that I had stolen the association's construction equipment by locking it inside a fence. 2 officers showed up and were, I want to say, very calm and professional about the whole thing. I walked them through the documentation, the deed on my phone, the printed survey report in my truck, the certified letter with tracking confirmation, the letter the HOA had sent demanding I stay off their so-called board-supervised property, the time-stamped photos showing the day the equipment appeared and the condition of the lot before and after. One officer looked at the neon survey stakes in the ground, looked at where the backhoe was sitting, and told me in straightforward terms that this was a civil matter, that I had not stolen anything, and that equipment stored on private land without the owner's consent was a dispute for civil court to resolve. He said the HOA president was welcome to file a complaint with the court if he believed he had a case. They left. I went home, made dinner, and waited. The rest of that week was the HOA board's problem to work through, not mine. But I heard most of what happened afterward from the management company representative who called to apologize, and from a neighbor who filled in some gaps later. The certified letter addressed to the board collectively had landed in a situation that was already starting to splinter. Several board members had genuinely not known the staging area was on a separate parcel. The president had framed it to the full board as using available open space on the edge of the community, and some members had not pushed for specifics. When the letter arrived addressed to the full board and multiple people read it at the same time, someone pulled up the county parcel viewer right there in the room. Within about a minute, the entire picture was visible to everyone. The lot had its own parcel number, its own tax record, its own owner, who was not the HOA and had no relationship to the HOA. The president had put his representation to the contractor in writing from an official HOA email address. The contractor's attorney had now sent the HOA a letter stating that the fraudulent property authorization was the direct cause of the work stoppage, and that the HOA was responsible for all resulting delay costs. The HOA's insurance carrier was involved because the exposure between the trespass claim, the storage fees, and the construction delay liability was not a number anyone wanted to look at. And the president had, as a finale, called the police on the property owner and accomplished nothing except making everyone's situation worse. He resigned before the end of the week. I don't know if it was fully voluntary. The new acting board president called me herself, and she was entirely different to deal with. She was direct, genuinely apologetic, and clearly just wanted a path forward that did not end in litigation. We got our attorneys on a call together within a few days and worked out a written agreement. The HOA would pay the accumulated storage fees, which had grown to an amount that caused a visible pause when it was read aloud during the call. They would hire a professional landscaping contractor of my approval to restore the lot fully, including filling and grading every tire rut, assessing and remediating the fuel-stained area, and reseeding the entire disturbed section. They would also sign a written acknowledgement that my lot was private property with no relationship to their association, no claim of any kind on their part, and no authority over it whatsoever. Once I had the first payment and the signed agreement in hand, I removed my lock. The construction crew had their equipment back that afternoon and returned to work the following morning. Their gazebo and walking path were finished about 3 weeks later, and to be fair, they genuinely looked nice from the road. The landscaping crew worked on my lot for 2 full days and did a proper job. The ruts were filled and graded correctly. The fuel-stained section was tested and came back clean after treatment. Fresh topsoil and seed were spread across the whole disturbed area. By the following spring, you could not tell anything had happened out there. The lot actually looked better than it had before because they had smoothed out some low spots that used to hold standing water after rain. I sat with what to do with the settlement money for a while. Part of me thought about just putting it in savings and letting the whole thing become a story I told at dinner parties. But one afternoon I drove past the new gazebo on my way out to the lot and noticed that the structure faced my property directly. The walking path ran right along our shared boundary line. People sitting in that gazebo looked straight across into my woods. I thought about the president wherever he had ended up, and more broadly about the kind of organization that had let things get that far. He was gone. But the underlying assumption that my land existed for their convenience did not disappear just because he resigned. I called a fence company. I had them install a cedar privacy fence along the full length of my property line on the HOA side. Solid board construction, 8 feet tall, set 1 inch inside my survey line on my side. My surveyor confirmed the placement in writing before they broke ground, so there would never be any question. The crew worked for 4 days, and the cedar was still bright and fresh smelling when they packed up and left. I drove out the morning after they finished and stood on my side with a cup of coffee, the kind of quiet morning my grandfather would have approved of. On my side of the fence, I could see through the trees, smell the lumber, and hear birds moving in the upper branches. On the other side, based on the sight line from the HOA's new gazebo, the view was 8 uninterrupted feet of cedar board. The HOA paid for that fence. They just didn't know that was what they were doing when they signed the check. I still go out every month, same as always, same 3 hours, same thermos of coffee. The survey stakes are in the ground where they belong. The lot is quiet. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work as on-site IT for a company, mostly user-end hardware and networking sort of things. Lots of user error or turn it on and off sort of calls. Can be mind-numbing at times, but I do enjoy it. The bane of my existence, and virtually every other IT person's existence I've ever known, is printers, which of course I get a call for one of our offices at the end of campus. I bundle up, grab my tools and supplies, and walk over. Get there and get the normal, everything is terrible and we need this printer. For the literally only 3 out of the normally 12 people are in the office today due to the cold. And this particular department has multiple printers in the area, like 2 more than the total employees in office today. But I do my level A+ bestest to get it fixed. Clean the printer, change the rollers, check settings, all the stuff that usually works. But today on this damn thing it sure doesn't. Keeps crimpling up the paper and jamming. So I tell the lady that called it in I am going to have to replace it. The normal doom and gloom follows and I schlep my arse back out to our shop to get another printer. I get the replacement ready, set it up, get it set to DHCP, make sure the damn thing works, etc., etc. But when I got back to the location, I see that the Ethernet cable had fallen behind a heavy filing cabinet. And of course, the damned wall plate it's plugged into is right in the middle of this like 6-foot long heavy cabinet. Not enough room to reach it on either end, and too heavy for me to tip even if I had someone else available to grab the cable. I let the user know and she absolutely freaks out. Apparently this printer that went down was the only one use, also happens to be the closest to her by about 3 feet. And we, just have to get it up and running now. Which, considering there is nothing special about the one that was broken and I had the exact same mode to replace it with, I doubt. I apologize, but let her know that I can't reach it or safely move the cabinet. I can set up her computer to print to the other printer, and tomorrow I will bring in a tool I have, reach the cable, get it hooked up, and it will be ready for her on Monday, no problem. She counters with a, well then who do I call to move the cabinet today? I let her know. Well, that would be property management, but their turnaround time, unless it's an actual emergency, tends to be 24 hours, and they are only on call on the weekends, i.e., they are off tomorrow and won't move the cabinet until Monday at the earliest. She, subsequently, insists we call them. Now for the malicious compliance. So I call PM on my mobile, put it on speaker, catch one of the guys before he gets ready to leave for the day, and he subsequently tells both of us, yeah, earliest we will get to it is 2 a day. Gotta be at least 2 of us. No pants can't help. He's in IT and not PM. Let me get the ticket entered in. Pause for keyboard clicking and random sounds of blue-collar cussing. Okay, yeah, we will be over Tuesday before noon unless something comes up. No pants, can I just plug that thing in? I stifle a chuckle, knowing that PM guy is more than capable of plugging in an Ethernet cable. Yeah, unless you really want it there, we can have a tech come over. Might have to check the schedule, I am off Mondays and Tuesdays. Who will be here, so might have to push it back into Wednesday. This whole time the user has the stunned look of someone that got smacked upside the head and is still recalibrating. PM guy says, nope, we are fine, Tuesday before noon unless an emergency pops up, and he hangs up. I tell the user, well, that will work for us in IT. I will get this old printer removed, thank you for your patience. Once PM confirms that everything is done, we will have a tech come by and make sure the printer is still working and is networked properly. After I got back to the shop and told the other tech on duty, we had a hell of a laugh. I called PM and told him to go ahead and cancel. I will bring my little grabber tool in tomorrow and get it hooked up. He said he would wait until Monday, since if he cancels the appointment it will trigger an email for the user since her name is on the ticket in the system. Update. The cable has been successfully retrieved. Little grabby tool was able to get in there and get it. Cable was resecured on its insecure little clip to hold it up, and subsequently plugged into the printer. The next one is an entitled people story. Around 3/4 through my shift at the front counter, this senior man walks in around 70. The whole time he was telling stories about his youth as a policeman, and I sat through and pretended to listen and be engaged. The first annoyance came from when he told me he was interested in the shirt which was on the mannequin in the front window, and asked me to check what size it was. Usually anything that has me leave the counter is an annoyance, but there was little to no one else on the shop floor, so I obliged and checked the clearly labeled tag. I told the guy that it was a L, large, to which he proceeded to tell me, that can't be right. Eventually asking for a tape measure to measure it himself. I didn't have a tape measure, nor was there a tape measure in the front counter. So in order to help this guy out, I pressed the little button on my desk, which calls the manager, and I asked my manager if there was a tape measure somewhere in the back room. Upon receiving a measuring tool, I handed it to him to make the measurements he wanted to know, but he then asked me to make the measurement myself because he had a sore finger. He asked me to measure the chest width, which I admit I didn't know how to do. I'm not a fashion student, I've never had to make a measurement like this before. After being away from the front desk for way too long now, I eventually make the correct measurement after taking the shirt off the mannequin. He then went on to say that it was too small for him. I still remained composed at this point, but it ticked me off that I now have to put this shirt back on the mannequin and place it back where it was. This was all manageable at this point, up until he started looking at the books we had. He placed a book on my counter and I assumed he wanted to purchase, so I tried to ring it up on the register, but he protested saying, "Oh no, I'm just reading it." He was blocking other people from making purchases by being directly in the way. He was talking to me the whole time about his past, and I just kept back-channeling to give the impression I was listening. After looking through like 10 large books, he asks me to keep some to the side by the till for when he's ready to buy them. This was fine. We do this all the time so people don't have to carry stuff around. He asked me to keep hold of around 9 to 12 books in the end before looking through the records. During this time, he kept butting into conversations other people were having on the shop floor, suggesting other places to go and purchase things. I don't think I saw him giving a second glance to a single record before he told me to add it to the pile, which was getting very big, and I started to have doubts he was even going to buy all of this. By this time, the shop was going to close in like 25 minutes. I rung up my manager asking to go to the toilet for a bit, meaning my manager would take over the job on the till while I go to the back room. I didn't need the toilet, I honestly just wanted my manager to see what this guy was doing. For reference, I can't talk to my manager privately about this because she is usually in the back room and I can't leave the shop floor, and if I call her over with the button, the guy would be in the room with us and it would be rude to talk about him. After coming back and briefly stopping to make a cup of tea in the back room, the man is still there. And the pile has gotten bigger. He also wanted some other assorted items alongside the books and records. I take over on the register again and the guy gets to the chocolate section. For some reason, our charity shop sells small, strange brands of chocolate bars, specifically sourced from the shop. The man takes most of them and adds them to the pile. I counted like 13 chocolate bars. By this time, we were closing in around 10 minutes. He had been in the shop for like 2 hours and heard the CD and the player repeat like 3 times, not including the times I changed it myself to offer some diversity for him. My manager, the guy, and I were the only 3 people left on the shop floor. He decided he was finished purchasing and I begun to ring up all the items. It took me actual ages. In total, it was $1,200, which I can say is the highest anyone has ever bought in my time in the shop before. Plus the 25% we get from certain items being bought, this would be great for us. We packed up all of his stuff in 2 large bags, somehow, and got everything ready for him. At this point, he opened up a chocolate bar and began eating it, before paying for it. He just mentioned how he was famished. Before finishing the chocolate bar, he leaves it on the counter and forgets about it. I had so much internal frustration at this point. Again, before paying for it, he asked my manager if he could have some help carrying the 2 bags to his car up the high street. I protested, saying that we'd prefer if you pay for it first. I was not going to allow this man to leave with $152 worth of items without first paying. I'm not sure why I didn't stop her at the time, but my manager agreed to help, if not reluctantly. This was so odd for me because she'd always been very responsible. But ultimately, it wasn't my place to call it out. The 2 leave. I'm left with the register showing the absurd amount of items once they come back, seemingly with the 2 bags in his car. It's time for him to pay. He tries to initiate another story about his past, but I quickly shut it down politely, telling him his total. I'm not sure how to phrase this to give my frustration justice, but after all of that, his card declines. I think I genuinely lost it at this point. He starts going on about how this happens all the time. I bet it does. He offers to go across the street to the bank to check out the issue. The bank across the street is a Nationwide and he did not have a Nationwide card. Also, the bank closed 3 hours ago. Also, we were not letting this guy leave the shop with all the stuff in his car. I doubt his athletic ability, but I was certain he was trying to make a runner. He tried his other card, but he put in the incorrect PIN 3 times. The shop was closed. I should have gone home 10 minutes ago, but I had to stay at the register while my manager and the guy went all the way back to his car, took the 2 bags out and back into the shop. I offered to help put all the stuff back on the shelves up until the guy says he wants us to keep it all for him for when he comes back another day to collect it. He won't. After that, he left. Anyway, thank you for watching.